Welcome to Poddy, April 26, 2026. A deep dive in... Alright, so today we're diving into something that hits close to home for a lot of people listening. The reality of cybersecurity jobs right now. Everyone keeps asking whether this field is overhyped or if we're actually understaffed. And honestly, the answer is way more nuanced than most people want to hear. We've also got some fascinating tech stories to unpack, including this wild headline about an amateur using ChatGPT to solve what's called an Erdoes problem, plus a GoDaddy domain security mess that perfectly illustrates why this field keeps us on our toes. But first, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What's really going on with cybersecurity careers? So here's my take on cybersecurity jobs. This field is genuinely tough to master because it changes daily and it's not scripted. Like, you can't just memorize a playbook and coast. Every day there's new vulnerabilities, new attack vectors, new tools, new compliance requirements. And that's both the beauty and the curse of this work. You're constantly learning, which keeps it interesting. But it also means you can never really relax and think you've got it all figured out. It's not like some other tech fields where you can specialize in one framework and ride that for years. The threat landscape evolves too fast for that kind of comfort. My honest assessment is that cybersecurity isn't overhyped in terms of need. The threats are absolutely real and growing, but it might be overhyped in terms of how accessible it is as a career path. You see all these boot camps promising you'll be a security analyst in 6 months, and that's just not realistic for most people. This isn't a field where you can fake it till you make it. You need to understand networking, operating systems, development, risk management, compliance frameworks, and honestly, human psychology. Plus, you need to stay current with an industry that moves at breakneck speed. So when people ask me if they should get into cybersecurity, I tell them yes, if you're genuinely curious and willing to commit to lifelong learning. No, if you're just looking for job security without putting in the work. Now, speaking of learning and problem solving, let's talk about this fascinating headline that caught my attention. Apparently, an amateur armed with ChatGPT solved an Erdoes problem. Now, I don't have the full details of what specific problem was solved or the technical mechanism, but what strikes me about this headline is the implications for how we think about expertise and tool-assisted problem solving. In cybersecurity, we're already seeing similar patterns where junior analysts armed with the right AI tools can sometimes spot patterns that more experienced folks miss. It's not replacing expertise, but it's definitely augmenting it in unexpected ways. What I find really interesting about this ChatGPT story is that it highlights something crucial. The key is knowing how to ask the right questions and how to verify the answers you get. That amateur mathematician still had to understand enough to frame the problem correctly for ChatGPT and to validate whatever solution came back. Same thing applies in our field. AI can help you analyze logs or identify potential vulnerabilities, but you still need the foundational knowledge to use these tools effectively. You can't just throw data at an AI model and expect magic. You need to understand what you're looking for, how to interpret the results, and most importantly, how to verify that the AI isn't hallucinating or missing critical context. And this brings us to a perfect real-world example of why cybersecurity fundamentals still matter, even in our AI-assisted world. There's this headline about GoDaddy giving a domain to a stranger without any documentation. Now, I don't have the full details of what happened here, but domain security is one of those foundational topics that every security professional needs to understand. Your domain is basically the keys to your digital kingdom. If someone can take control of your domain, they can redirect your email, your website, potentially intercept two-factor authentication codes. It's a single point of failure that can cascade into massive problems really quickly. What strikes me about this GoDaddy headline is that it highlights a persistent problem in our industry. The human factor in security processes. You can have all the technical controls in the world, but if your verification procedures are weak, or if someone makes a mistake in your support process, all that security can unravel pretty quickly. This is exactly the kind of scenario that keeps security professionals up at night. We spend so much time worrying about sophisticated nation-state attacks and zero-day exploits. But sometimes the biggest risks come from basic process failures. It's a reminder that security isn't just about fancy tools and threat intelligence. It's about having solid procedures and making sure people follow them consistently. You know what's really interesting when I look at stories like this domain transfer issue? It reinforces why cybersecurity jobs are both in high demand and genuinely challenging. Companies need people who can think through these kinds of process vulnerabilities, not just the technical ones. You need to understand the business impact of a domain transfer gone wrong, the legal implications, the incident response procedures, the communication strategy. It's not enough to just know how DNS works. You need to understand how domain security fits into the broader risk picture for an organization. That's the kind of strategic thinking that separates junior analysts from senior security professionals. This connects back to what I was saying earlier about cybersecurity not being scripted. Every incident is different. Every organization has different risk tolerances, different compliance requirements, different business priorities. A domain security incident at a small e-commerce site is going to look very different from one at a bank or a healthcare provider. You can't just apply a cookie-cutter response. You need to understand the context, assess the specific risks, and adapt your approach accordingly. That's why this field requires continuous learning, and why it's genuinely difficult to master. It's not just about memorizing security frameworks, it's about developing judgment and the ability to think on your feet. So, bringing this all together, if you're thinking about getting into cybersecurity, or if you're already in the field and wondering about the job market, here's my honest take. Yes, there's demand for cybersecurity professionals, but it's not evenly distributed. There's huge demand for people with experience, people who can think strategically about risk, people who can communicate with business stakeholders, people who can handle incident response under pressure. There's less demand for people who just have certifications but no practical experience or curiosity about how systems actually work. The market rewards depth over breadth, and it definitely rewards people who can adapt to new challenges. The field is also becoming more specialized, which creates both opportunities and challenges. You've got cloud security, application security, industrial control systems, privacy engineering, threat intelligence, security architecture. All of these are distinct career paths that require different skill sets. So instead of thinking about cybersecurity jobs as one monolithic thing, think about where your interests and aptitudes align with the specific needs in the market. And be prepared to keep learning, because the only constant in this field is change. What worked 5 years ago might be completely obsolete today, and what's cutting edge today might be table stakes in 2 years. My advice for anyone listening who's considering this career path? Start with the fundamentals. Understand how networks work, how operating systems work, how applications are built and deployed. Get hands-on experience. Whether that's through labs, capture the flag competitions, or contributing to open source security tools. Read the security advisories. Follow the researchers. Understand the threat landscape. And most importantly, develop your communication skills, because you'll spend a lot of time explaining technical risks to non-technical stakeholders. The ability to translate between technical reality and business impact is incredibly valuable in this field. The stories we talked about today, the amateur solving mathematical problems with AI assistance, the domain security incident, these aren't just interesting tech news. They're examples of the kinds of challenges and opportunities that define this field. Technology is constantly evolving. New tools are changing how we approach problems. But the fundamental need for people who can think critically about security risks isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's becoming more important as our digital dependencies grow, and as the attack surface expands with cloud adoption, remote work, and IoT proliferation. So, that's my take on the current state of cybersecurity careers. It's not overhyped in terms of importance, but it might be overhyped in terms of accessibility. It's a field that rewards curiosity, continuous learning, and the ability to adapt to new challenges. If that sounds appealing to you, then it might be worth exploring. Just go in with realistic expectations about the commitment required. Do your own research on the specific areas that interest you. Talk to people actually working in the field. And be prepared for a career that will never let you get comfortable. But if you thrive on that kind of challenge, it can be incredibly rewarding work. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time with more stories from the ever-changing world of cybersecurity.